They were called lovers, icons, legends. But behind the applause, desire wasn't romance, it was power. In the golden age of classic rock, sex was currency. Fame erased boundaries. Women became proof of dominance. Love blurred into control. What the world celebrated as freedom often masked fear, loneliness, and emotional collapse. This is not a list of conquests. This is a record of excess where intimacy was used, not shared. These are the most notorious womanizers in classic rock history. And what their desire really cost them. Mick Jagger desire as identity for Mick Jagger. Promiscuity wasn't a side effect of Femit, was the foundation of his identity. His androgynous stage movements, unbridled sexuality, and boundary-breaking confidence created the dangerous allure that defined the Rolling Stones. Women weren't conquests or trophies. They were confirmations of power, evidence of his gravitational pull. Long relationships, marriages, and countless affairs blurred into one continuous narrative of desire without consequence. Jagger moved through romantic entanglements with the same fluid arrogance he brought to the stage, treating intimacy as another performance to master. But beneath this narrative of sexual freedom lay a profound emotional distance. Jagger didn't attach, he presided. Love for him wasn't about equality or vulnerability. It was an extension of the stage, another arena where he could dominate and control. Over time, this lifestyle didn't liberate him, it isolated him. He became an icon worshipped by crowds, adored from afar, yet in his private life, he never truly let anyone close enough to know the man behind the myth. The legend of his promiscuity was, in essence, a mask for his fear of genuine emotional contact, a carefully constructed defense against the intimacy that might expose something real. Gene Simmons. Sex as a brand. Gene Simmons didn't hide his promiscuity. He weaponized it, monetized it, turned it into mythology. He spoke in numbers, exaggerated his conquests, and wore his sexual history like armor. For Simmons, sex was less about pleasure and more about power display, a quantifiable measure of dominance. Women weren't individuals with agency. They were evidence of conquest, trophies to validate his rock god status. He documented, cataloged, and bragged, turning intimacy into statistics and relationships into ledger entries. This obsessive need for control pointed to a deeper void. Simmons fled from emotional bonds, viewing vulnerability as weakness and sentiment as danger. Even decades later, he described romance as risk, love as a threat to autonomy. He used his rock stardom as a fortress, constructing walls no one could penetrate. Behind the makeup and the bravado was someone deeply afraid of letting anyone see beyond the persona. Promiscuity wasn't freedom for Simmons, it was architecture. Each casual encounter was another brick in the wall he built around himself, ensuring that while thousands knew his name, virtually no one knew his heart. Rod Stewart, romance without stability. Rod Stewart's promiscuity wore a more romantic disguise. Models, actresses, whirlwind affairs that looked like love stories from the outside. Stewart seemed to chase genuine connection, but nothing ever lasted. His relationships followed a predictable pattern: intense beginnings, passionate middles, inevitable endings. Stewart fell in love repeatedly, genuinely, but he fled just as quickly as he committed. He was trapped between the desire to attach and the terror of being trapped, caught in an endless cycle where every new relationship brought hope and every ending brought relief. The women changed, but the pattern remained constant. He wanted the intoxication of new love without the work of sustained intimacy, the romance without the responsibility. Over time, this cycle exhausted him. Fame fed his youth, but delayed his maturity, creating a man perpetually stuck in the emotional patterns of his 20s, even as decades passed. Promiscuity for Stewart wasn't calculated. Hedonism, it was the result of profound indecision, an inability to choose between freedom and connection. He loved the idea of love more than the reality of it, and that gap between fantasy and commitment defined his romantic life. David Bowie. Desire as experiment for Bowie. Sexuality was exploration, an artistic experiment as vital as his music. Women, men, ambiguous identities. Nothing was fixed, everything was fluid. He approached desire with the same creative fearlessness he brought to his art, refusing to be confined by convention or expectation. His promiscuity seemed liberated, a rejection of society's narrow definitions of sexuality and identity. But this freedom was also a defense mechanism. Bowie divided his emotions into experiments, intellectualizing desire to avoid genuine vulnerability. He staged love rather than lived it, performed intimacy without fully surrendering to it. Each relationship became another character he inhabited, another mask he could wear and discard when the performance ended. Promiscuity for Bowie was less about pleasure and more about transformation. By constantly reinventing himself sexually and romantically, he maintained control over the internal emptiness that threatened to consume him. His relationships preserved distance rather than creating closeness. Even when physically intimate, Bowie remained emotionally elsewhere, always one step removed. Observing rather than fully participating in his own romantic life, Jimmy Page powered behind closed doors. Jimmy Page's promiscuity was quiet but dark, shrouded in shadows and silence. While others flaunted their conquests, Page operated in the murky territory of groupie culture, tour buses, and closed hotel rooms. His sexual history was tangled with allegations of control and troubling power imbalances that went beyond typical rock star excess on stage. Page was magnificent guitar virtuoso, a musical genius. In private, he was distant, unreachable, surrounding himself with people who couldn't challenge him. His relationships were marked by profound power imbalances, situations where genuine consent became questionable. The romantic dynamic wasn't about mutual desire, but about control and dominance. Promiscuity here wasn't freedom, it was escape. Page didn't attach. He directed, orchestrated, maintained absolute control. This approach to intimacy isolated him over time, creating a man surrounded by people but deeply alone. The emotional walls he constructed kept everyone at arm's length, ensuring that, while many entered his orbit, none truly reached him. His promiscuity became another form of isolation, a way to be physically close to people while remaining emotionally unreachable. Elvis Presley, trapped by Desire Elvis, was worshipped by women from the moment he stepped into the spotlight. But this adoration didn't liberate him, it imprisoned him. The attention came so early, the power arrived before he'd developed the emotional tools to handle it. He never learned how to approach relationships as an equal, because he'd never experienced that dynamic. Women saw him as a fantasy, an impossible dream made flesh. This prevented genuine connection. How could relationships be authentic when one person was constantly being worshipped? Elvis couldn't separate himself from his image, couldn't find people who saw the man rather than the icon. His promiscuity wasn't driven by appetite, but by this fundamental disconnect between his public persona and private reality. The constant availability of attention and affirmation created a life without boundaries or consequences. Promiscuity for Elvis wasn't choice. It was an uncontrolled current. He was swept along by unable to establish normal patterns of intimacy. He was loved, but remained profoundly lonely. Desire didn't nourish him, consumed him, hollowed him out, leaving him surrounded by people yet fundamentally alone. Steven Tyler. Chaos. As intimate as Steven Tyler's relationships were storms, unpredictable, destructive, overwhelming. Excess defined everything: drugs, alcohol, boundary violations, emotional volatility. Love for him wasn't order or peace. It was turbulence, intensity without stability. He seemed allergic to calm, uncomfortable with anything resembling healthy attachment. His promiscuity intertwined with addiction, creating a lifestyle where boundaries dissolved and consequences were ignored. Tyler approached intimacy the way he approached everything else, with absolute intensity and zero restraint. He burned through relationships, leaving damage in his wake while simultaneously being consumed by the flames himself. This chaos served a purpose. It drowned out the emptiness beneath. Promiscuity for Tyler was a method of suppression, a way to avoid confronting whatever internal void drove his constant need for stimulation and distraction. He drew people close with magnetic intensity, then destroyed the connection with equal force. The pattern exhausted everyone involved: partners, family, and Tyler himself. Trapped in a cycle he couldn't break, John Lennon, Love and Guilt Lennon, was promiscuous but lived with profound guilt about it. Infidelities, open relationships, public confessions. His romantic life was marked by contradiction. He championed love in his music, preached peace and unity, yet continually hurt the people closest to him. He searched for love desperately, but couldn't stop inflicting pain. Childhood trauma and abandonment fears poisoned his relationships, creating patterns of attachment and betrayal he couldn't escape. He wanted fidelity but practiced infidelity, desired stability but created chaos. The gap between his ideals and his actions tormented him. Promiscuity for Lennon wasn't power, it was complexity, confusion, the acting out of unresolved wounds. He defended love philosophically but couldn't practice it consistently in his personal life. His romantic history was marked by genuine attempts at connection, undermined by self-destructive impulses. Unlike some who embraced promiscuity without conscience, Lennon carried the weight of his choices. Aware of the damage but seemingly unable to choose differently, Eric Clapton. Desire that destroyed Clapton's relationships, fractured friendships, and shattered trust. His romantic history included pursuing women from his inner circle, affairs that destroyed decades-long bonds, betrayals followed by public remorse. His most famous romantic pursuit, falling for his best friend's wife, became legendary not for its passion but for its destructiveness. Love for Clapton wasn't healing, it was corrosive. His romantic impulses overrode loyalty, ethics, and consequence. He followed desire wherever it led, regardless of who got hurt, including himself. Each relationship seemed to begin with hope and end with wreckage, leaving a trail of damaged trust and broken friendships. Promiscuity for Clapton was about searching for something redemption, perhaps, or wholeness. But each romantic entanglement ended in guilt rather than fulfillment. He sought love as an answer to internal pain, but found that his approach to relationships only created more suffering. Unlike those who seemed unbothered by their romantic chaos, Clapton appeared genuinely tormented by the consequences of his desires. Caught between impulse and conscience, Robert Plant, silent excess Robert Plant, was a quiet philanderer. He lived intensely but spoke sparingly, participating fully in groupie culture while maintaining privacy about his personal life. Where others bragged and documented, Plant remained discreetly silent, enjoying excess without advertising it. He stood at the center of rock's most notorious sexual culture, yet managed to keep his private life relatively guarded. This wasn't morality, it was strategy. Plant understood that mystery enhanced allure, that silence created intrigue. His promiscuity was extensive but shrouded, practiced but not performed. For Plant, promiscuity wasn't about loss of control. It was the spirit of the era, the culture he inhabited. He participated without letting it define him publicly. But this silence also signified emotional distance. The privacy he maintained wasn't just about discretion. It was about keeping everyone at arm's length. His promiscuity, though less theatrical than others, still served as a barrier to genuine intimacy. Another way to experience physical closeness while maintaining emotional remove. They had everything: money, beauty, access, worship. And still, it wasn't enough. The rooms got quieter. The faces changed. The emptiness stayed the same. Desire multiplied, but connection never arrived. History remembers them as rebels and romantics, but desire without intimacy leaves nothing behind, only repetition. When the lights went out, what remained wasn't love, it was hunger.